Welcome to the NWR Aussie Resources Conference. My name is Kerry Stevenson. Next up, we have Eastern Metals. The ASX code is EMS. Joining me today is Wayne Rossiter. He's the Managing Director. And they've got lots of things. They've got advanced copper, nickel, zinc, got some cobalt, gold, my favorite, and of course, lithium and rare earths, all exploration in some very rich areas, both in the Northern Territory and in New South Wales. Wayne, I'm looking forward to your presentation. Take it over.
Nice to see you again, Kerry. And it's been a little while since we've spoken, but look, the focus will be on future metals and battery metals specifically, but we certainly have precious metals as well. A quick overview of the company. We listed at the end of October last year, having raised $6 million, and we listed on the back of two principal flagship assets. The first being our Browns Reef project in New South Wales, which is a polymetallic deposit. It has an existing JORC compliant exploration target on it of 27 to 37 million tonnes. But within that, there was some high grade hits that have never been followed up on, which was of what was of interest to us. And the second flagship project is the home of BULLION copper mine in the Northern Territory, which has an existing 2012 compliant JORC resource estimate on it. 2.5 million tonnes at 2.8% copper equivalent. That's 1.8% copper, principally with zinc credits, but there's also precious metals and cobalt in there as well. Now, these were previously owned by Kidman Resources, who was taken over by Wesfarmers, and they had about $9 million spent on them. So they're advanced exploration projects, really great assets. There was unfinished business. Kidman moved on and went off to Mount Holland and left these fallow for a long time. And so we've inherited all of that work. And I'd like to say that both assets have now been substantially improved since we've acquired them from the work we've done. So they're just getting better. Our third project is a thing called the Thomson project, which is in New South Wales. It's a higher risk, high reward project in areas where there's potential to discover world-class ore bodies. We didn't raise capital to drill out there, but we're ready to drill and looking for funding partners. What we've also done in the interim since we've listed is we've acquired some additional tenure in the Northern Territory, which is complementary to the Home of Bullion project, following up on anomalous copper trends up there, as well as a new project, all of which sit within the Arunta pegmatite province. And that pivot, if you like, into lithium is something which we've been keen to do, and we've only just got an access on the ground in the Northern Territory at the very end of June, due to native title considerations, and we started drilling in July. So we've been boots on the ground as soon as we've been able to, and really looking to do some more work up there. So a quick overview of the company. We've got only 54.5 million shares on issue. We issued at 20 cents. I've got share price there of 15 cents. It's a little bit lower today, but no matter how you cut it, our enterprise value is extremely low. I mean, those are Kidman assets alone. If I couldn't sell them for a hell of a lot more, orders of magnitude more than our EV today, there'd be something wrong. So, well,
let's also point out, Wayne, that Kidman had spent $9 million before you got your hands on them. So, and a market cap of 8 million doesn't even bring into account what they've spent.
No, look, absolutely not. And as we all know, the money you've spent on a project doesn't really count unless you've discovered something, but there's been discoveries in both instances. So it's a really good data set that we've improved upon. When we bought the assets, we paid cash for them from Wesfarmers, and Bob Duffin, who's our major shareholder up there, that's the reason why he's in that position, is because he wrote that hard cash check to acquire the assets. Bob's one of the three founders, myself and Gary Jones. Gary Jones is a very distinguished geologist, and I'll get to him in a moment. Bob is retiring at the upcoming AGM, which is scheduled for 16 November. So it's a pretty tight capital structure. And what it means is on pretty thin trading, our share price can move quite a lot. So to the board, I've mentioned that Bob's going to retire. We're really fortunate to have two fantastic non-executive directors, Kathy Moises, who's a very well-known geologist and resource analyst and now company director, and Jason Burden, who's a structural geologist and a very commercial operator as well. So really good brains trust in the organisation. Two other gentlemen here, Gary Jones and Bob Richardson, they kicked around with Bob Duffin back in the GeoPico days. And back in the day, GeoPico was one of the preeminent exploration outfits in Australia. So these guys have known each other for a long time, got a lot of runs on the board. Gary, he's credited with the discovery of North Parks. He did all the early work at Lake Cow. He knows the terrain in New South Wales in particular, but he cut his teeth in the territory in Tennant Creek. And Bob Richardson, he's a distinguished geophysicist, the son of the doyen of geophysics in Australia. And he really came on board around the Thomson project, which is something he's had some involvement with in the past, and he's very keen to get out there and drill up a number of targets out there. We've got something like 17 drillable targets out there looking for Allura-style deposits. So on to New South Wales, our Cobar project. I won't go into the smaller tenure, but the principal asset is the Browns Reef project. It's 10 units. It's in the southern Cobar Basin. And in the Cobar Basin, it's prospective for base metals and precious metals, but it's not unusual for ore bodies to be quite narrow, steeply plunge in and go very deep. And talk about the Allura mine or the CSA mine. I mean, the CSA mine's 1.7 kilometres underground now. So those style of ore bodies, not necessarily big strike length, but when you jag one, you can start chasing them. And we're seeing that with projects like Federation, held by Aurelia. And if you look at who our neighbours are, there's Peel Mining, who have a number of projects not too far from us, all around the sort of scale of deposit that we're initially looking to take Browns Reef to, but we're certainly hoping to get to something a little bit bigger. So I'll jump straight to Browns Reef, if I may, Kerry. And this is it. It's interpreted to be a syncline, about 8 kilometres long. The bulk of the work that Kidman did was on the eastern flank of that syncline over an area of about 2.7 kilometres of strike. And you can see some section lines on the plan diagram there, A, B, and C. So that area there and just a bit beyond to the north and south is where the bulk of the drilling historically was done. And you can see we've got a couple of red dots there were high-grade hits that Kidman had that hadn't really been followed up on, which is our immediate area of interest. But we also know there's geochemical anomalism on the western flank and even in the middle of the system. So this thing's interpreted as a syncline. Imagine the hull of a ship or a canoe. And on the western flank, there's some thin basalt cover and there hasn't been much work done. This thing was drilled back in the late 70s, 80s by EZ Corporation, and they were so convinced they were going to have a mine out there. They had 6 rigs running, bought some land between the project and town, which is only 5 clicks away, and put 4 houses on it. For a whole bunch of reasons, they didn't get to continue. Kidman came along, did more work, and now we've inherited all of that data set. And I've said on this slide and the previous slide, I've mentioned the Evergreen discovery, so I'll get to that now. So here's the plan view looking west, showing, you can see the density of drilling was down in the south, in the Browns Reef South high-grade target zone, which is an area we have yet to drill. Through serendipity, we've got into the northern area first in terms of land access, and our first program was following up on that high-grade hit, and we've had a discovery. Our second drill program has stepped that out a little bit further. I'll go to the details of that in a moment. Evergreen's named after the property that it's on, but that dotted circle around that target zone, the sort of strike length of a typical Cobar deposit is 200-300 metres in strike length. It can easily fit within that. So within this broader system, there's the potential for one or more discoveries. And on our maiden drill program, we've had a discovery. So it's been really, really exciting for us.
Well
so here we are, Kerry, drilling out at Browns Reef. It's been difficult drilling. We've had COVID, we've had flooding. When we were drilling, the mast was up and down like you wouldn't believe as thunderheads rolled over. And I was surprised we got the rig out on the last program because it was so muddy. In fact, we had to call the program short. We only did half the holes. We couldn't get into the paddock where we were chasing the deposit to the north. So these are our drill results. I won't go through them individually, but what we've seen is ore grade and ore width hits on 4 holes drilled in an initial program to the south. So the first program was chasing the project, that initial hole up and down dip and a long strike. And then we chased it further to the south in the second program, didn't get to chase the north because the paddock was too wet. But we're reporting just those straight zinc grades there. We're not doing combined grades of zinc and lead or anything like that yet, but we've seen up to over 14.6% zinc. And the widths are really good widths for mechanised mining. So it's shaping up to be something that's pretty exciting. really interestingly, we've seen in our first program, the most southern hole, some really elevated copper up high in the system. And we knew from the work Kidman had done that the elevated copper has been seen quite deep, which is not unusual. Just, you have that variance in mineralogy of these projects based on, heat and so forth. We saw it up high, and we actually saw some really high grade stringer zones that don't get reported in here. We had a assay of 5.1% on one of those stringer zones as we came into it. So really interesting. Could mean there's a heat source there or something, we don't know. But this thing is open, a long strike, and down depth. So here's a schematic of the section. The yellow hole is the Kidman hole we chased, and the red holes are ours. And essentially all we did, we drilled 50 metres up depth, 50 metres down depth, 50 metres along strike to the north and south in the first program. Then we did another 2 holes further to the south in the next. And so we've had all these really good intercepts. So we've probably got about 150 metres of strike at this stage, and about 300 metres vertical along dip. It's a steeply plunging system. So we're going to keep chasing that. Our initial target is to get to something around 5 million tonnes. And we're well on the way to doing that. So hopefully we'll be out there drilling between now and Christmas. We're out there just fixing the road so we can get back in, and hoping for a little bit of dry weather so we can get a rig out there. So moving to the Northern Territory, we acquired the Homer Bullion project for the copper resource that was on it, and it's been our real focus. It's interpreted to be a VMS system. It's high grade. It was at one stage the highest grade copper mine in Australia, and we think there's fantastic potential to build that resource, both by resource extension drilling, but also, and more importantly, finding additional lodes to add tonnage to that system. So it needs more tonnage. The grade's brilliant. And so one of the things we have done is we've acquired this complementary tenement package. So those dark pink tenements were the initial tenements. You can see Prospect E and Homer Bullion marked as the principal prospects on that one tenement, which has got a geographical separation in it. All the other tenements marked there were new tenements we've acquired from a unlisted outfit called Balgan Resources for 150,000, 50 in cash and 100 in shares at 24 cents a share. But the principal objective of that was to add to the anomalous copper trend to the west and northwest from Homer Bullion out to a thing called the Malbungus copper gossan. And we were out there recently, and you could pick up bits of azurite and malachite off the road just next to the outcropping gossan. There's old workings there. So that's area work was done in the 80s by Aberfoyle. So we know it's anomalous for copper and indeed zinc. And zinc is one of the elements in the ore body at Homer Bullion as well. So that was the...
Sorry to interrupt you. Did you say just a moment ago that this was one of the highest grade copper mines in the past?
Yes, absolutely. It was mined back in the 50s, and they used to pull high grade ore out from the upper oxide area. They used to leave it on the short highway in 44-gallon drums to be picked up. So it was done a little bit differently, but it needs more tonnage. There has been some whittle optimizations put around the Homer Bullion project as a standalone project. And it's getting pretty interesting at today's copper prices, but more tonnage is what's needed to shift it into something that could be developed economically.
Okay.
This whole map is sitting in what we'd call the Arunta pegmatite province, which is an area of increasing interest to junior explorers. And specifically, there's the Barrow Creek pegmatite field where our Homer Bullion project is situated. Now, we've done some scout work out there. We've found some, we're just looking at a little bit of the granites out there. We've found some pegmatite material with those granites just off our tenure, and we'll be chasing that the week on the 19th of this month. We've got a field program starting looking for, well, it's really to map granites and to identify pegmatites, but also when we'll drill in Homer Bullion, which we've just completed a few weeks ago, our maiden program out at Homer Bullion, we actually found pegmatites at the Homer Bullion mine site in the creek behind it in our core yard. So they're our 2 points of interest that we'll be chasing, looking for that initial pegmatite reconnaissance program. But this Arunta pegmatite province is another named pegmatite field just in the very southeast of this diagram, which has recently been pegged by TNG, who own the vanadium project nearby. This whole tenement package in the south is immediately adjacent to the Encounter Resources Sandover Copper Project. So we're about to initiate a strategic review of the prospectivity of our broader tenement package here in the Northern Territory, and obviously lithium is going to form a central part of that review, but there's also prospectivity for a whole host of other minerals, in particular rare earths, as well as base metals and precious metals. So Homer Bullion, there was two principal areas we acquired it for: the Homer Bullion project, which is down that southern tenement package there, and you can see the new tenements surrounding it. And you can see there's a whole bunch of named prospects around that, including Malbungus all the way out to the west. So these are known geophysical and structural targets. For instance, the nose, it's where there's a big fold in the system there where there could be accumulation of minerals, and all the ore bodies so far are magnetic. There's pyrrhotite associated with them. There's a blanket of hematite over them as well, but there's a difference in the magnetic signature. So we're just about to commission or in fact, we have commissioned a magnetic drone survey over that area, both around Homer Bullion and Malbungus, so we can zero in on targets a bit more closely. So that's probably going to be our next program after the pegmatite reconnaissance program in the Northern Territory. To the north is another thing called Prospect D. It's had a bit of drilling on it, and I'll jump down to that in a moment. Oh, but before I do so, let me talk about the drilling we did at Homer Bullion. So we went out there to do a resource expansion program. We drilled just under 1,500 meters. It was a pretty aggressive program. So there's two main lodes at Homer Bullion. So the main lode, the south lode, and this diagram here is the main lode, which has an upper and lower section. It hasn't really been connected yet. No, it's the mineralization's thinned out a little bit. So our discovery hole has been here, and what we did is we drilled 49AA. It was a step out of around 70, 80 meters from the known wireframe, and we saw mineralized material, thin bands of it, and what looked like the edge of what could be an ore body or an extension of the ore body. So we brought that in a bit deeper for HD 49B, and that's still about 40 meters out from the existing wireframe. And we've had 13.6 downhole meters of massive sulfides. Within that, there's a 3 meter really high grade section. It's been freighted to Sydney, should be in parks in the next day or so, and it'll be cut and assayed after that. But it's looking really high grade. So we're anticipating some pretty exciting results from that. But what that means for us is this existing resource is yet to be closed off. So there is certainly that potential to expand the existing resource. But we're also looking to add tonnage through finding other lodes, and that's probably going to be the shift in our exploration focus going forward in the short term. But we'll certainly come back and revisit this. I've talked about these other prospective targets in the area, so I won't spend more time on that, but I'll just quickly talk to Prospect D, which is that separate little tenement in the north. It's had a little bit of drilling done on it, and what we've seen there is some really good copper and nickel intercepts. That's about all we know about at this stage, but it's something we have to chase. So you can see there, we've had widths of anywhere from 5 to 8 meters, from 1.4 to 2.2% copper, and up to 5,800 parts per million nickel. So it's really interesting. We don't know much about it yet, but that's an area which we'll be following up on. Back to pegmatites, pretty poor specimen in the top right-hand corner. It was around a quartz blow, but we know pegmatites are associated with those sort of exhalations out of granites. And this, you see the tip of Sam, our geologist's boot there. That was just a hunk of pegmatite sitting in our core yard down at Homer Bullion, and we looked in the creek out the back. We found more, and there's some up around the old workings. So could be intrusives in the bullion schist there. That's what we're going to discover, hopefully, when we get out there in about a week and a bit's time. Oh, so we're going out there. So it's that initial program. Let's just get boots on the ground, go have a bit of a look, chip rocks, and the idea is to get out there, map the granites, identify some pegmatites, and then work out what to do next. There's a lot of transported cover in the area, so it wouldn't surprise me if we then have to do some more remote type techniques to chase these as they go under the sand dunes that are around the area. And our last project is the Thomson project. This is out the back of Burke, north of Wilcannia. It's a huge area, around 1,600 square kilometres. But what we're looking for is Allura-style targets out there. And that ore body was discovered through a weak magnetic bullseye anomaly. And we have something like 17 of them out in this area. Some of them are actually a little bit linear as well. The area is covered in Erromunga sediment, so it's been difficult drilling in the past, and that's probably why it has been lightly explored. But there has been drilling out there in the past by Minotaur and Thomson Resources, and all the previous explorers, including the Geological Survey of New South Wales, have all come to three important conclusions. The first is that this, even though it's called the Thomson Fold Belt, the Cobar Basin seems to wrap around to the northwest, so it's been identified as Cobar Basement.
Just letting you know, Wayne, we're running out of time. Just if you can.
Well, I'll wrap it up in the next 60 seconds.
Thank you,
so
mate.
Cobar Basin, number one. Number two, the material that's been seen in the drill core is very similar to what's around the halo of the Allura project. And number three is the magnetic resonance in the core doesn't match the targets, which means they've missed them. So we're looking for funding partners out there, and we are working with some groups on that. So in terms of news flow, I expect we'll have another drilling program between now and Christmas. We're doing magnetics out at home of BULLION, as well as our lithium reconnaissance and strategic review in the territory. And we're about to commence a gravity survey in about a week or so out at Browns Reef, looking to work up further targets there in the future. The company itself, look, we started off saying 9 million had been spent on it. The projects have just gotten better since then, and our enterprise value is extremely low given the quality of the assets we have. This is not brownfields, early stage exploration. We've got drilling targets ready to go. So really exciting times ahead for us, I think. Kerry, and there you go. We're finished. So I hope you got time for some questions.
Yes, I do. I've got a couple of questions here. If you've got questions from the audience, please pop them in the Q&A box down below. A couple of questions that have come in. You've recently commenced exploration in the Northern Territory. How are you planning to schedule upcoming drilling programs between there and Browns Reef? And is Browns Reef to be the priority ahead of the opportunity in the Northern Territory? That's in terms of your exploration budget.
Yeah, look, Browns Reef will be the next drill project subject to weather. And in the Northern Territory, however, we definitely are having a pivot in the Northern Territory to start chasing lithium. And we do want to drill at home of BULLION again. That's a little bit further down in the seriatim of activities, simply because we're looking to have less capital intensive work done. We'll get more bang for our buck finding new copper lodes that we can drill in the future, and or lithium exploration in the territory. Whereas Browns, that's turned into something big, and that's almost a no-brainer to drill that, to chase that. So that's the most likely order. But I'll tell you what, if we get out there on our lithium reconnaissance program and we find pegmatites, we'll drill them. Okay?
Yep, got it. With Browns Reef, you just mentioned it. How large has that zone now become? And what does the ongoing program look like, I guess, to test the broader area?
Yeah, look, we haven't done any density work yet, but I'd estimate we're at the upper end of 1.5 to 2 million tonnes at the moment, just in that 150 metres of strike and 300 metres of depth. That's a bit of a back of the envelope calculation. We will continue chasing that along strike, and we will also chase it at depth once we work out the strike limitations of that high grade zone.
Well, that's Wayne Rossiter. It's a very interesting time for you, as you said right at the start. You only listed in October of last year. You've hit the ground running, boots on the ground, looking at all these different projects. I wish you all the best. And with the new lithium up there in the Northern Territory, things could get pretty interesting. But for now, thanks for joining us at the NWR Aussie Resources Conference. Good to see you.
Thanks very much, Kerry. Nice seeing you again.